Amani clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders as she trudged through the muddy streets of Kijana, a small but bustling town on the outskirts of the capital. The rain had been relentless all afternoon, soaking the worn-out fabric of her dress, but she had no choice but to press on. She had just finished another grueling day of scrubbing floors and washing dishes at the marketplace, earning just enough to buy a small portion of rice and vegetables for the night. Life had not always been this way. Once, she had dreams of becoming a teacher, of having a stable home filled with love and laughter. But dreams were a luxury she could no longer afford. The moment she told her parents she was carrying Kwame's child, her entire world shattered. Disgraced and cast out, she had no one to turn to. And Kwame, the man who had once whispered sweet promises under the shade of the ancient baobab tree, vanished like a ghost. No explanations, no apologies, nothing but silence. As the wind howled through the narrow alleyways, Amani pulled her son, Jabari, closer. At 5 years old, he was small for his age, but his bright eyes held an intelligence far beyond his years. "Mama, are we going to eat tonight?" Jabari's voice was soft, hopeful. Amani forced a smile, pushing back the sting of tears. "Yes, my love. We'll have a feast." It was a lie, but lies had become necessary to keep hope alive. Endless hardships and an unbreakable spirit. For years, Amani took whatever work she could find, washing clothes, mending old garments, selling handmade beads, anything to keep Jabari fed and clothed. The people of Kijana whispered about her behind her back, calling her a disgrace, a fool for carrying the child of a man who abandoned her. But she did not let their words break her. Her only focus was on Jabari. He would not grow up feeling unwanted. He would not suffer the way she had. By the time he turned 10, Amani had managed to save enough to start a small fabric business. With a single sewing machine gifted by an elderly widow who had taken pity on her, she began crafting vibrant scarves, skirts, and tunics. Slowly, her reputation grew and people started seeking out her work. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to keep Jabari in school. Enough to give him a future. Jabari, in turn, grew into a boy who understood struggle. He studied hard, aced his exams, and never complained when Amani couldn't afford new clothes or fancy toys. He knew the sacrifices his mother made, and he vowed to make her proud. A mother's determination. One evening, as they sat by the dim candlelight of their small room, Jabari placed his tiny hand over Amani's rough, calloused fingers. "One day, Mama, I'll take care of you. You won't have to work so hard anymore." Amani chuckled softly, stroking his hair. "As long as you grow up to be a good man, my love, that is all the reward I need." But deep down, she prayed his words would come true. She had suffered enough. Maybe, just maybe, fate would show her mercy. Years passed, and Jabari grew into a young man with an unshakable resolve. He excelled in school, his sharp mind outpacing even the wealthiest students who had every advantage he lacked. Amani, despite the exhaustion of long days at her shop, stayed up late with him, helping where she could, encouraging him when the weight of expectations became too much. One evening, Jabari came home with a letter in his hands, his eyes shining with hope. "Mama," he breathed, barely able to contain his excitement, "I got the scholarship. They want me to study engineering in the city." Amani's heart swelled with pride and fear in equal measure. The city was far, filled with opportunities but also dangers. But she knew she could not hold him back. This was his chance, his future. She cupped his face in her hands, her voice steady despite the emotions choking her. "Then you must go, my son. Make the most of this opportunity. Show them what you're capable of." Jabari nodded, determination hardening in his gaze. "I will, Mama. I promise." A new world. Adjusting to city life was not easy. Jabari found himself surrounded by students from wealthy backgrounds, their lives so different from the struggles he had endured. But he did not let it discourage him. He worked harder than ever, pushing himself through sleepless nights, juggling classes, part-time jobs, and endless study sessions. He called Amani whenever he could, her voice the anchor that kept him grounded. "Are you eating well, Mama?" he asked one night, worry creeping into his tone. She laughed softly. "I should be asking you that. I'm fine, my son. Just focus on your studies." Little did he know, she often skipped meals to save money to send him small allowances. She still worked tirelessly, sewing late into the night, never once complaining. Her sacrifices fueled his determination, building a legacy. After years of relentless effort, Jabari graduated with top honors. But he did not stop there. He had a vision, one that extended beyond just finding a stable job. He wanted to create something of his own. With a small loan and relentless drive, he launched a tech startup. The early days were brutal, filled with failures and uncertainty. But just as his mother had never given up on him, he refused to give up on his dream. Slowly, the company gained traction. Investors took notice. His innovations were groundbreaking, earning him recognition across the industry. Within a few years, Jabari was no longer just a boy from Kijana, he was a name people respected, a force to be reckoned with. One day he returned home, pulling up in a sleek car far removed from the days of walking barefoot through the village streets. Amani stood in the doorway of their humble home, tears glistening in her eyes. He stepped out, holding out a key. "Mama, this is for you. A new home closer to the city. You'll never have to struggle again." Amani's hands trembled as she took the key, looking up at her son, the boy she had raised, the man he had become. She pulled him into an embrace, her voice thick with emotion. "You've made me proud, my son. So proud." But as the winds of change swept through their lives, new challenges lurked just beyond the horizon. And not all attention that came with success was born from genuine admiration. Jabari's rise to success had been nothing short of remarkable. From a struggling boy in Kijana to a respected entrepreneur, his journey was a testament to resilience and hard work. But with success came challenges he had never anticipated, challenges that tested not just his intelligence but his heart. As his business grew, so did the circle of people around him. Some were genuine, drawn to his vision and integrity. Others, however, lurked in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to exploit his achievements. The most unexpected of these figures was Kwame, the father who had abandoned him and his mother years ago. One evening, as Jabari was leaving his office, a security guard approached him hesitantly. "Sir, there's a man waiting outside. He says he's family." Jabari frowned. "What's his name?" "Kwame. He says he's your father." The word sent a cold shiver down Jabari's spine. He had spent his whole life without a father, never expecting, never needing his return. And yet here he was. Taking a deep breath, Jabari stepped outside. Kwame stood there, older now, with lines of hardship etched across his face. But his eyes still held a familiar glint, the same one Jabari had seen in the mirror countless times before. "Jabari," Kwame said softly, "my son." A lifetime of emotions surged within Jabari: anger, confusion, even a sliver of longing. But he kept his face impassive. "Why are you here?" His voice was measured but firm. Kwame sighed, shuffling his feet. I made mistakes. I was a fool to leave. But I've changed. I want to know you to be part of your life if you'll let me. Jabari studied him for a long moment. The man before him was not the same young Kwame who had vanished when Amani needed him most. But did that matter? Could time and regret erase the past? You didn't want to be my father then. Why should I believe you want to be one now? Jabari's voice was steady, but his heart pounded. Kwame's shoulders sagged. I don't expect forgiveness overnight. I just want a chance. Jabari inhaled sharply, his mind racing. He had built his life without this man. Did he owe him anything? Finally he spoke. I can't change the past, Kwame. And I don't know if I can trust you. But I also know that resentment won't help me move forward. So, if you're serious about making amends, it won't be easy, but the choice is yours. Kwame nodded, a glimmer of hope in his tired eyes. Thank you, Jabari. Threats from the business world. While Jabari navigated the emotional turmoil of his father's return, another storm was brewing, one that threatened the very foundation of his company. Rivals in the tech industry were not pleased with his rapid rise. Competitors spread rumors questioning the legitimacy of his success, while some tried to poach his best employees with promises of higher salaries and better benefits. Then the threats became more direct. Anonymous emails warned him to step back before it's too late. One night, his office was broken into, important files tampered with. It was clear someone wanted to see him fall. Instead of backing down, Jabari did what he had always done. He fought harder. He increased security, confronted dishonest employees, and focused on innovation. He knew that the only way to silence his enemies was to prove beyond any doubt that he belonged in this world of giants. But the stress took its toll. He barely slept, often skipping meals, pouring everything into protecting what he had built. It was Amani's voice that brought him back from the edge. My son, you are strong, but even the strongest trees need roots to keep them grounded. Don't lose yourself in the battle. Remember why you started this journey. Jabari exhaled, realizing the truth in her words. Success meant nothing if he lost himself in the process. A new purpose. Determined not just to survive but to thrive, Jabari shifted his focus. He expanded his business, but not just for profit. He wanted to uplift others. He started mentorship programs, offering scholarships to underprivileged youth, ensuring that no child with talent would be held back by circumstances as he once had been. As he stood before a crowd of young students one evening, he saw in them the same hunger, the same dreams that had once burned in him. You are not defined by where you start, he told them. You are defined by how you choose to rise. The applause that followed was not just for him, but for every single person who had ever fought against the odds and won. That night, as he returned home, he found Amani waiting for him. She looked at him with quiet pride, her eyes shining. You did it, my son, she whispered. You made your own path. Jabari took her hands, the hands that had worked tirelessly to give him a future. No, Mama, he said softly. We did it together. And for the first time in a long while, he felt truly at peace. Jabari had come a long way from the struggling child of Kijana to a powerful entrepreneur. But with wealth and influence came new challenges, and among them was the growing concern about the people in his life, particularly those who claimed to love him. His mother, Amani, had always been a woman of great intuition, and she had reservations about Jane, the woman Jabari planned to marry. Amani had met Jane on several occasions, and though the woman was poised, elegant, and seemingly affectionate toward Jabari, something about her felt off. There was a certain coldness behind her polished smile, a calculating edge to her words. Amani had always believed that true character was revealed in how a person treated those beneath them, not just those they sought to impress. So, with quiet determination, she devised a plan. Disguising herself as a maid in Jabari's household, Amani stepped into a world that would offer her an unfiltered view of Jane's true nature. It was an unusual step, but one she felt necessary. If her son was to bind his future to this woman, she needed to be sure he was making the right choice. The mask begins to slip. From the moment Amani donned her uniform and blended into the household staff, she saw Jane in a new light. When she had been introduced as Jabari's mother, Jane had been all charm and grace. But now, thinking Amani was merely a maid, Jane barely spared her a glance. The first evening, as Amani was wiping down the dining table after dinner, she overheard Jane speaking on the phone in hushed tones. Yes, of course, he's still completely oblivious. Do you really think I'd be wasting my time if I weren't sure he'd propose soon? Once everything is settled, I'll have access to more money than I could ever need. Amani's hands froze mid-wipe. Her heart pounded. The sweet, affectionate woman Jabari had fallen for was nothing more than a schemer. Over the next few days, Amani observed more unsettling behavior. Jane was dismissive of the staff, ordering them around without a hint of kindness. When she thought no one important was watching, her behavior became outright cruel, scolding a housekeeper over a minor mistake, rolling her eyes when the chef asked how she liked her meal. One morning, as Amani served Jane her coffee, she accidentally knocked over a spoon. Jane's reaction was instant and harsh. "Can you be any more useless? If you can't do a simple job, why are you even here?" Amani lowered her gaze, keeping her composure. "I apologize, madam. It won't happen again." Jane scoffed. "Just don't let me see you making a mess again." Amani clenched her fists. She had seen enough. A glimpse of real love. While Jane showed her true colors, Amani also noticed someone else, Emily, Jabari's longtime secretary. Unlike Jane, Emily treated everyone with kindness. She spoke to the staff with respect and carried herself with quiet humility. She never acted entitled, despite working closely with Jabari and having access to the wealth and power that came with it. One evening, as Amani pretended to tidy the study, she overheard a conversation between Jabari and Emily. "You work too hard, Jabari," Emily said with a small smile. "You should take a break sometime. There's more to life than just business." Jabari chuckled. "Spoken like someone who doesn't have an entire empire to run." Emily shook her head. "Spoken like someone who cares about you as a person, not just as a CEO." Amani noted the sincerity in Emily's voice. There was no ulterior motive, no calculation, just genuine concern. And in that moment, she knew that Emily was everything Jane was not. A mother's dilemma. Armed with the truth, Amani faced a difficult choice. Should she confront Jabari directly, risking his anger? Or should she wait, hoping he would see Jane's true nature on his own? She decided on a middle path. She began dropping subtle hints, questioning Jabari about what he truly valued in a life partner. "Love isn't just about admiration, my son," she told him one evening. "It's about who will stand by you when no one is watching. Who will treat others with kindness, not just you." Jabari frowned but didn't dismiss her words. That was enough for now. Amani knew she had set something in motion. It was only a matter of time before the truth could no longer be ignored. Amani's words had planted a seed of doubt in Jabari's mind. Though he adored Jane, he found himself scrutinizing her actions more closely. At first, he dismissed the small inconsistencies: her impatience with waitstaff, the way she spoke about his friends when they weren't around. But soon the pieces started to form a picture he could no longer ignore. One evening, Jabari arrived home earlier than expected. He entered quietly, planning to surprise Jane, but instead, he became the one surprised. From the hallway, he heard Jane's unmistakable voice, sharp and irritated. "I can't stand playing this role much longer," she said. "Do you know how exhausting it is to pretend to care about every little thing he says? But it'll be worth it soon." "He's so blinded by his feelings that he doesn't even question me." Jabari's breath caught in his throat. He peeked into the room, his heart pounding. Jane was on the phone, pacing in front of the fireplace. "Once we're married, I'll have everything. You don't have to worry. I'll make sure his money works in our favor." A sickening realization settled over him. The woman he had planned to spend his life with had never truly loved him. She loved what he could offer. The weight of betrayal crashed down on him, and yet he remained composed. If there was one thing he had learned from his mother, it was patience. A carefully laid plan. Jabari knew he needed proof, not just for himself but to ensure there was no escape for Jane when the truth was revealed. He enlisted the help of his trusted friend and lawyer, Kofi, who arranged to have Jane's next conversation recorded legally. A few days later, armed with undeniable evidence, Jabari decided it was time to act. He planned an elaborate dinner at his estate, inviting close friends, business partners, and of course Jane. Amani, still in her maid disguise, stood by silently, waiting for the moment her son would take back control of his life. As the evening progressed, Jabari stood, raising his glass. "To love and trust," he toasted, his voice steady, "and to knowing when those things are real." He then turned to Jane, his expression unreadable. "Jane, my love, there's something I'd like to share with everyone tonight." A large screen lit up, playing the recording of Jane's incriminating conversation. Gasps filled the room as her words echoed through the space. Jane's face paled as she realized what was happening. "Jabari, this isn't what it seems," she stammered, but her usual charm and composure were gone. Jabari remained unmoved. "No, Jane, this is exactly what it seems. And now everyone knows." The weight of the moment settled in, and Jane, seeing no way out, stormed out of the estate in humiliation. true love revealed. As the guests departed and the night grew quiet, Amani finally stepped out of the shadows, shedding her disguise. Jabari turned to her, a mixture of gratitude and sorrow in his eyes. "You knew," he murmured. Amani smiled gently. "A mother always knows." Jabari exhaled, a long breath of relief. "I was a fool." "No, my son," Amani corrected. "You were hopeful. And now you are wiser." A few days later, as Jabari processed everything, he found himself drawn to Emily. Their interactions had always been effortless, filled with genuine care and laughter. Unlike Jane, Emily had never needed to pretend. As he watched Emily help an elderly worker carry a heavy stack of papers, he smiled to himself. Perhaps love wasn't about grandeur and illusion, but about the quiet, unwavering presence of someone who truly cared. For the first time in a long while, Jabari felt hope again. Jabari sat alone in his study, the flickering candle casting long shadows across the mahogany desk. The echoes of Jane's betrayal still rang in his ears, her words slicing deeper than he had expected. He had thought himself a good judge of character, someone who could see through deception. And yet, he had been blinded by charm, by carefully constructed lies. Amani, watching from the doorway, knew better than to speak immediately. She had seen this look before, the quiet storm brewing inside her son. She stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Pain is a brutal teacher," she said softly, "but it teaches lessons that stay with us forever." Jabari exhaled, running a hand over his face. "I should have known, Mama. I ignored the signs." "Because you wanted to believe in love," Amani said, pulling a chair beside him. "That isn't a weakness, Jabari. It's a sign of your heart. And the right woman will see it for the treasure it is." Jabari met his mother's gaze, seeing the wisdom in her eyes. "Then how do I know who the right woman is?" Amani smiled. "By watching how she loves when there's nothing to gain." A shift in perspective. In the days following the scandalous revelation, Jane disappeared from Jabari's life entirely. The media caught wind of the incident, and though Jabari avoided making any public statements, the truth spread quickly through social circles. Jane had underestimated him, assuming he would quietly let the humiliation pass. But Jabari's silence was not out of weakness, it was out of wisdom. Meanwhile, Emily remained a steady presence in Jabari's life, though she never overstepped boundaries. She had been there long before the storm and remained after it had passed. Jabari found himself watching her more closely, noticing things he hadn't before: how she treated everyone with kindness, how she never sought attention yet commanded respect, how she carried burdens without complaint. One evening he called her into his office. "Emily, I need to ask you something." She straightened, sensing the weight behind his words. "Of course, sir." Jabari hesitated, then asked, "Have you ever been in love?" Emily blinked, caught off guard. "That's an unusual question for a business meeting." Jabari chuckled. "You're right. But humor me." Emily smiled, thinking for a moment. "Love is complicated. It's not always grand gestures and poetry. Sometimes it's just showing up, even when it's inconvenient." Jabari absorbed her words. "And have you ever loved someone who didn't see you?" Emily met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Sometimes people are looking for something they think they need, and they miss what's right in front of them. The weight of her words settled in his chest. He had been one of those people searching for something dazzling while overlooking something real. A different kind of love. Jabari began to spend more time with Emily, not as an employer but as a man trying to understand what he had missed before. They shared long conversations, quiet walks, and unspoken understanding. He realized that love wasn't about dramatic confessions or extravagant displays. It was in the simple moments, in the quiet loyalty that never wavered. One afternoon, as they sat by the garden, Emily turned to him. "What are you afraid of, Jabari?" He exhaled. "That I'll make the same mistake again. That I'll trust the wrong person." Emily reached out, placing her hand over his. "Then take your time. Love isn't a race. It's a choice made over and over again." Jabari looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. And for the first time in a long while, he felt something unfamiliar but welcome: peace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Amani watched from the veranda, a knowing smile on her lips. Her son was learning, growing. And perhaps, just perhaps, he was finally beginning to understand what love truly meant. Jabari stood on the balcony of his estate, gazing at the stars that dotted the night sky. For the first time in a long while, he felt a quiet sense of clarity. The betrayal, the pain, the lessons, everything had led him here, to this moment. And in this moment, his mind kept returning to Emily. She had always been there, a constant presence through the storms of his life. He had been blind before, too caught up in illusions to see what was right in front of him. But now he saw her not just as an employee or a friend, but as someone who had unknowingly become the foundation of his world. Taking a deep breath, he made a decision. It was time to take a step towards something real, an invitation with meaning. The next morning, Jabari found Emily in the garden, carefully tending to the flowers. She looked up as he approached, her warm smile as effortless as ever. "Good morning, sir." "Jabari," he corrected gently. "No formalities between us today." Emily raised an eyebrow but nodded. "All right. Good morning, Jabari." He hesitated for a brief moment before saying, "I'd like to take you to dinner tonight." Emily blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Dinner? As in a meeting?" He chuckled. "No, just dinner. You and me. No business talk. Just two people enjoying each other's company." For the first time, Emily looked uncertain. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "I've never been more sure of anything." A small smile played on her lips, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied him carefully, searching for something in his eyes. Finally, she nodded. "All right. Dinner it is. A night of truth." That evening, Jabari took Emily to a quiet, intimate restaurant on the outskirts of the city. It was far from the grandeur of his usual dining spots, no extravagant decorations, no press, just a warm, inviting atmosphere where conversations flowed easily. Over candlelight and soft music, they spoke about everything: dreams, regrets, childhood memories. For the first time, Jabari found himself opening up without hesitation. "I spent so much time looking for something perfect that I never realized love isn't about perfection," he admitted. "It's about understanding, about choosing someone even when it's not easy." Emily stirred her drink thoughtfully. "And what made you realize that?" He met her gaze. "You." Emily looked away, a soft blush touching her cheeks. "Jabari, you don't have to say that." "But I do," he insisted. "Because it's the truth." The moment hung between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Emily finally looked back at him, her expression unreadable. "I need time." Jabari smiled, nodding. "Then take all the time you need. I'll be here." The beginning of something new. As they walked out of the restaurant, the cool night air wrapped around them. Jabari reached for Emily's hand but didn't take it. He simply let it hover near hers, an unspoken promise that he wouldn't rush her. Emily glanced at him, then down at their almost touching hands. Slowly, she closed the distance, her fingers intertwining with his. It was a small gesture, but to Jabari, it felt like the first real step towards something true. Amani watched from the shadows of the estate as they returned. A soft smile played on her lips as she whispered to herself, "Perhaps love has finally found its way to my son." Little did they know, this was only the beginning of a journey that neither of them had expected. Jabari stood by his office window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. His thoughts swirled like a storm, memories of betrayal, lessons learned, and the undeniable presence of Emily in his life. Since Jane's departure, Emily had been a constant, steady, kind, unwavering. Yet, Jabari had hesitated, unsure if his growing feelings were simply gratitude or something deeper. He had been deceived before, and he couldn't afford another mistake. Amani, always attuned to her son's turmoil, approached him that evening. "You are at a crossroads, my son," she said softly. "Fear and love often wear the same mask, but only one will bring you peace." Jabari sighed. "And how do I know which one I am choosing?" Amani smiled knowingly. "By asking yourself one simple question: does she make you a better man?" Jabari considered this. Emily had never demanded anything from him, never sought his wealth or status. Yet her presence alone had changed him, made him more thoughtful, more patient, more himself. The unexpected visitor. The following day, Jabari was deep in thought when an unexpected guest arrived: Faye, his estranged father. Faye's once proud demeanor had faded with age. His eyes, however, still held the same arrogance. Jabari remembered. "I heard about your engagement falling through," Faye began, taking a seat without invitation. "Seems like you inherited my bad luck with women." Jabari clenched his jaw. "I don't believe this is a matter of luck. It's a matter of choices." Faye scoffed. "Is that what your mother taught you? To think you're better than me?" Jabari met his father's gaze, unflinching. "No. She taught me to be better for those I love." Faye leaned back as if weighing his son's words. "And is there someone you love now?" Jabari hesitated. "There is someone who makes me want to be a better man." For the first time, Faye looked almost amused. "Then don't waste time second-guessing. If she is worth it, you'll regret not fighting for her." Jabari had never taken his father's advice before, but this time Faye's words struck a chord. A confession under the stars. That evening, Jabari found Emily in the company garden, tending to a small row of flowers. "You're working late," he said, stepping beside her. Emily smiled without looking up. "Sometimes things bloom best at night." Jabari exhaled. "Emily, I've spent too much time trying to be cautious, afraid of repeating past mistakes. But I realized something today: love isn't about avoiding risk. It's about choosing the right person even when you're afraid." Emily finally met his gaze, her eyes searching his. "And who is the right person, Jabari?" Jabari took her hands in his. "You. It's always been you." A moment of silence stretched between them before Emily whispered, "Then why did it take you so long to see it?" Jabari smiled, brushing a stray curl from her face. "Because sometimes, the most important things are the ones we overlook for too long." Emily laughed softly, squeezing his hands. "Then don't overlook me anymore." Under the vast, starlit sky, Jabari leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. For the first time in a long time, he knew this was love, raw and real, and he would never let it go. From a distance, Amani watched with a knowing smile. Her son had found his way not through wealth or status, but through the only thing that truly mattered, love that made him whole. Jabari stood at a crossroads, torn between the growing realization of his feelings for Emily and the fear of making another mistake. He had spent years building his empire, guarding his heart against deceit and betrayal. But love, true love, was unpredictable. It was terrifying in its vulnerability, yet beautiful in its sincerity. Amani, ever the wise observer, saw the hesitation in her son's eyes. She approached him one evening as he stood on the balcony, staring into the city lights. "Jabari, do you trust yourself?" she asked softly. He turned to her, puzzled. "Of course I do, Mama." She smiled knowingly. "Then why do you doubt your heart?" Jabari exhaled, resting his hands on the railing. "Because I don't want to be blind again." Amani placed a gentle hand on his. "Love isn't about certainty, my son. It's about trust, not just in another person, but in your ability to choose wisely." Her words echoed in his mind as he prepared to make the most important decision of his life. The grand gesture. Determined to test the sincerity of his feelings, Jabari invited Emily to a private dinner. It was nothing extravagant, just a quiet evening in his garden, beneath a canopy of stars. He wanted to see if their connection could thrive in simplicity, away from wealth and expectations. Emily arrived in a modest yet elegant dress, her usual warmth evident in her eyes. "This is beautiful, Jabari," she said, taking in the serene atmosphere. He gestured for her to sit, pouring them both a glass of wine. "I wanted a night without distractions. Just us." As they dined, their conversation flowed effortlessly. They spoke of dreams, of fears, of moments that had shaped them. And for the first time in years, Jabari felt seen, not as a businessman, not as a wealthy bachelor, but as a man searching for something real. Then, with a deep breath, he said, "Emily, if I lost everything tomorrow, my wealth, my status, would you still be here?" Emily set her glass down, meeting his gaze. "Jabari, I was here before you ever looked my way. And I'll be here long after, not because of what you have, but because of who you are." His heart clenched at her words. It was the answer he had hoped for, the one he had feared he wouldn't find. A final test. Though Jabari was certain of Emily's sincerity, Amani had one final test in mind. She orchestrated a scenario where Jabari would pretend to have suffered a financial downfall. News spread rapidly that his company faced a major crisis, and speculation ran wild. Emily, unaware of the plan, showed up at his home the next morning, concern evident in her eyes. "Jabari, I heard what happened. Are you all right?" He sighed, playing his part. "I might lose everything, Emily. Everything I've built." Without hesitation, she stepped forward and took his hands. "Then we'll start over. Together." It was in that moment that Jabari knew this wasn't just love. This was devotion, the kind that wealth couldn't buy. Amani, watching from the shadows, smiled to herself. The test was over, and Emily had passed with flying colors. The proposal. That evening, under the same stars where they had first spoken of love, Jabari knelt before Emily, holding a simple yet meaningful ring. "Emily, you have shown me what love truly means. Not in grand gestures, but in unwavering loyalty. I don't need riches or security, I only need you. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Jabari. 1,000 times yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Amani looked on, her heart full. Her son had finally found what he had been searching for all along. Love, pure, untainted, and true. But before they could celebrate, an unexpected figure from the past emerged, threatening to unravel everything. As Jabari held Emily's hands, basking in the warmth of their shared love, an unexpected voice sliced through the moment. "So this is what you've become, Jabari? A man who kneels before a woman who offers you nothing but empty promises." Everyone turned to see Khalil, Jabari's estranged father, standing at the entrance of the garden. His presence alone sent a wave of tension through the air. Amani stiffened, her memories of betrayal flashing before her eyes. Khalil had abandoned her and their son all those years ago, leaving them to fend for themselves. And now, after all this time, he had returned with bitterness in his voice and arrogance in his stance. Jabari slowly stood, shielding Emily behind him. "Why are you here, Khalil? You made your choice years ago." Khalil scoffed, stepping forward. "I heard of your success. I thought perhaps my son had become a man of power, of status. But here you are, wasting it all on a woman who will never understand your worth." Emily flinched at the words, but Amani, ever the fierce protector, stepped forward. "Don't you dare speak of worth, Khalil. You threw away your family because of your own selfishness. And now you think you can return and dictate Jabari's life? You lost that right long ago." Khalil smirked. "You still have that fire, Amani. But it doesn't change reality. Money attracts vultures, and you, my son, have let one into your life." Jabari clenched his fists, his voice steady but firm. "Emily is nothing like the people you surround yourself with. She is kind, selfless, and honest. She stood by me when she thought I had lost everything. That is more than you have ever done." Khalil narrowed his eyes but said nothing. He had lost this battle before it even began. Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked away, disappearing into the night like a ghost of the past. Emily turned to Jabari, searching his face for any lingering doubt. "Are you okay?" He exhaled and smiled, cupping her face gently. "I've never been more sure of anything." Amani, watching them, felt her heart swell with pride. Her son had broken the cycle of pain and abandonment. He had chosen love, real, unwavering love. A wedding to remember. Months later, the grand estate was filled with the sound of joyous laughter and music. Friends and family gathered to witness Jabari and Emily's union. The ceremony was not extravagant in wealth, but was overflowing with love and genuine happiness. Amani, dressed in an elegant gown, wiped away a tear as she watched her son stand at the altar, waiting for his bride. When Emily appeared, radiating beauty and grace, the entire crowd gasped. As she reached him, Jabari whispered, "You are my home." Emily smiled. "And you are mine." The vows were exchanged, and when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the cheers were deafening. Amani sighed in relief. Her son had found happiness, and her journey of struggle had led to this beautiful moment. Life is not defined by the hardships we endure, but by the love we choose to embrace. Jabari and Amani's story reminds us that true love withstands the test of time, that sincerity will always outshine material gain, and that family is built on more than just blood. It's built on loyalty, sacrifice, and unwavering faith in one another. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, love when it's real will always find a way.